Again, welcome to my favorite topic, the Amarna period. This is Akhenaten, who was the ruler during this time period and who really turned ancient Egyptian culture on its head. He built a whole new city and moved the entire court there and changed up the religion to put a god called the Aten as the head god. And to top it all off, he essentially changed an art form that had been so standardized since the Old Kingdom, with very, very little exceptions, to this. So why do you look like this, though? Many have said that this is the first quote-unquote realistic images of ancient Egyptians that have ever been depicted, meaning that they're essentially moving away from the very idealistic imagery that we have seen. And that means that many people assumed that Akhenaten and his family especially actually did look like this, which has led scholars for a really long time to assume that he had some sort of medical condition to essentially explain why he looked like this. Things like Marfan's syndrome or Froelich's syndrome have been proposed, and some of these have been debunked because we do believe that we actually have the mummy of Akhenaten, though this is highly contested, and that mummy has been tested, and they don't have those things. So it's obviously still hotly debated if that is the mummy, but it's hard to tell because he doesn't really look exactly the same. But see, I'm an art historian, and there are a little bit simpler explanations as to why he looks like this. And it actually comes down to artistic taste, and that Akhenaten himself had some sort of choice on how he wanted to be depicted in this new world that he was coming up with. And we do know that pharaohs did have some choice because we do sometimes see minute differences in the imagery of pharaohs' faces and bodies that show that this is obviously somebody's choice, whether that is the actual pharaoh or the artist themselves. But you would assume that the artist, if they're working for the pharaoh, probably has to do what the pharaoh says. Akhenaten worshipped a god called the Aten, which essentially is the sun, but unlike the gods Horus and Ra, who are also considered the sun, this Aten was genderless, and it is never depicted as a human or as an animal, which is very unique when you look at the entire pantheon of Egyptian gods. It was pretty much just a sun disk in the sky with these little rays that had tiny little hands that would reach out and essentially touch or caress the people that it was bringing its sunshine to. Art historians essentially believe that Akhenaten chose to be depicted with both male and female attributes as a reflection of this genderless god, and that he is now the prophet or middleman between this god and the people, and thus reflects this god itself. These attributes include the very wide hips, the low hanging belly, the larger breasts, a very long and slender face, the almond-shaped eyes, and the large lips and the wide nose. Now, truly in my personal opinion, I do believe that Akhenaten looked a little bit like this, because I have seen so many different versions where in the very early part of the Amarna period, they are very exaggerated. They are very different. And then it sort of kind of softens over time. But there are certain attributes that I feel are probably actually reflections of him. Not that he has a medical condition, but that, hey, he just was a plus-size guy. Again, this is more of a personal opinion because I have done some really deep psychoanalyzing of Akhenaten himself, and this is just something that I could understand how he wanted to actually be reflected as himself, at least a little bit, in these pieces, when previous people like his father and his grandfather, etc., had really no sort of personality in any of their pieces. They were very idealized and just kind of looked generic. And I could see somebody kind of really wanting to branch out and show it a little bit of themselves. But let me know if that makes sense, and I can go into really great detail and show you lots of different images of him over time in case you want to see more.